For centuries, Egyptologists, religious scholars, and historians argued over one question: who was the real Pharaoh, the ruler who challenged Moses? But the problem isn't just identifying a king. It's uncovering why Egypt spent 3,000 years trying to erase him from history. And today, we're going to solve that mystery once and for all. Today's story is not just about a pharaoh, it's about a ruler whose existence became so controversial, so politically dangerous that Egypt may have rewritten its history to hide his name forever. From sealed tombs to erased inscriptions and conflicting mummy identifications, we are about to break down a mystery older than the pyramids themselves. Who was King Firon? Let's begin. In every ancient civilization, legends grow from fragments of truth, but few figures have generated as much confusion, debate, and mystery as the man referred to for centuries as King Firon. The moment we begin searching for his identity, we encounter a problem that makes this mystery different from any other in Egyptian history. The name Firon itself is not a name at all, it is a title. A transformation of the ancient Egyptian word Pharaoh, meaning great house, which later evolved into Pharaoh. Yet in religious texts, stories, and cultural memory across regions and centuries, Firon is treated as a specific individual, a single ruler, a defiant king, a man who stood against Moses. This creates a strange tension. How can a title become attached to one king? And why is his identity nowhere clearly recorded, even though Egypt wrote everything down with obsessive detail? To understand who King Firon really was, we first need to understand the Egyptian worldview. Every pharaoh believed he was the living embodiment of a god. His victories were divine, and any defeat was unthinkable. Egyptian scribes carved the king's achievements into stone to ensure his power echoed for eternity. History was not just a record. It was a political weapon. And because of that, the identity of the pharaoh who faced Moses presents a unique problem. If the stories of his downfall are true, if he suffered an unimaginable catastrophe, if his army vanished, if his reign ended in humiliation, then Egypt would have every reason to bury his name. A pharaoh cannot be remembered as defeated. A pharaoh cannot be remembered as powerless. This means that the search for King Firon does not begin with famous monuments or grand tombs, but with silence, gaps, erasures, and missing names. As historians look deeper, another layer of complexity appears. During the period traditionally associated with Moses, several powerful pharaohs ruled Egypt: Seti I, Ramesses II, Merneptah, and others whose names never survived. Each one left behind monuments, temples, inscriptions, tax records, military campaigns, and genealogies. Their lives are documented with astonishing detail except in the specific events that would identify Pharaoh unmistakably. The Pharaoh of Moses is never mentioned directly. Not in the triumph lists, not in the royal annals, not in the tomb inscriptions. It is as if the Egyptians collectively agreed to erase one chapter from their own past. And that deliberate silence becomes the loudest evidence of all. When researchers examine this mystery, they notice something unusual. Across thousands of years of Egyptian history, kings built temples boasting of victories, even exaggerated ones. When they lost battles, they rewrote them as victories or simply ignored them. But the Exodus story, if historical, would not be a simple defeat. It would be a national trauma. A pharaoh losing his entire army in a single night would shatter the divine image of kingship. Scholars believe this is why no direct Egyptian record mentions anything that resembles the event. Instead, clues appear in indirect fragments, sudden breaks in monuments, kings whose names were erased from lists, incomplete mummies, and crucial gaps in the timeline. Egypt did not preserve the story because preserving it would have destroyed the foundation of Pharaoh's godlike authority. The identity of King Firon becomes even more complicated when we compare religious accounts, historical documents, and archaeological findings. Religious texts focus on moral lessons, not political details. Egyptian inscriptions prioritize state propaganda, not truth. Archaeological evidence reveals only pieces of lives long gone. When these three sources collide, contradictions appear everywhere. One pharaoh matches the military strength described. Another matches the timeline. Another matches the personality. Yet none match every detail perfectly. It is as if the identity of Firon is trapped between worlds, part historical figure, part erased king, part mythic villain, and part political secret. This confusion forces historians to ask a difficult question: was Firon one man, or was he a composite memory? Did one ruler face Moses, or did multiple kings' stories merge over time as centuries passed? The deeper the investigation goes, the clearer one thing becomes. The Egyptians who lived through the reign of the Pharaoh connected to Moses had a reason to hide him, to erase him, to remove him from the line of kings as if he had never existed. And when a civilization as powerful, meticulous, and legacy-obsessed as ancient Egypt tries to erase someone, they often succeed for thousands of years. Would you like me to expand the next keynote as well? For a civilization that carved its victories into stone and built monuments meant to last until the end of time, ancient Egypt did something incredibly unusual when it came to the pharaoh connected to the story of Moses. It went quiet. Not silent by accident, silent by intention. The deeper researchers look into this period, the more they realize that Egypt's greatest mystery isn't what was written, but what was deliberately not written. To understand why, we need to step into the mindset of a kingdom where history, religion, and political power were all part of the same machine. A pharaoh wasn't just a ruler. He was a god walking among mortals. His power wasn't symbolic, it was absolute, divine, unquestionable. So imagine what would happen if such a divine figure suffered the kind of catastrophic defeat described in ancient texts. A disaster so devastating that it shook the foundations of the empire. A king destroyed, an army vanished, a national humiliation too great to record. In Egypt's worldview, such a moment could not be allowed to exist. Egypt used history as a shield. When a pharaoh failed, scribes rewrote events, reshaped narratives, or hid the truth behind layers of myth. Even military defeats, when acknowledged, were described as victories with creative twists. But the events associated with Firon would have been impossible to spin into something triumphant. A king challenged by a prophet, a court humiliated, a nation struck by unexplained calamities, and finally an entire army lost in a single, unforgettable moment. No stone inscription could hide that. The only solution was removal, erasure, silence, and that silence becomes the central clue in the search for Firon's identity. When Egypt wanted to erase someone from history, they had a brutal but effective method. They destroyed names. In their belief system, a person lived forever only if their name was remembered. A name carved into stone was eternal. A name erased was annihilated. This wasn't just historical censorship, it was spiritual execution. And that is exactly what happened to certain kings during the period suspected to align with the Exodus timeline. Names scratched out, faces hammered away, cartouches broken. Royal lists rewritten to skip rulers who once held enormous power. The Egyptians didn't do this randomly. They reserved this treatment for traitors, for heretics, for kings whose reigns brought shame or disaster upon the nation. The pharaoh connected to Moses fits that pattern perfectly. But why would Egypt fear acknowledging a single king's downfall? The answer lies in their political structure. A pharaoh was the heart of the kingdom, the link between gods and humanity. If a pharaoh could be defeated by plagues, challenged by a prophet, and ultimately destroyed in front of his people, then the entire belief system that upheld Egyptian society would collapse. Kingship wasn't just leadership, it was the divine order itself. Any story suggesting that a king failed so catastrophically would threaten the authority of every pharaoh who came after. So instead of preserving the truth, the scribes crafted a different version of reality. They recorded what strengthened the throne and buried what weakened it. Another reason Egypt might have wanted to hide this story involves political stability. The 19th dynasty, which many scholars associate with Moses, was a time of intense power struggles, succession conflicts, and attempts to maintain imperial control. A disaster involving an entire military force disappearing would have sparked rebellion, economic collapse, or foreign invasion. It was safer to erase the event than to leave future generations questioning the competence of the royal bloodline. Any record that portrayed a pharaoh as defeated or powerless was a threat to national unity. There is also an unspoken reason, one that historians whisper but rarely publish directly. The story of Moses and the Pharaoh became the foundational narrative for millions of people outside Egypt. A story so powerful, so influential, that acknowledging it would mean surrendering a piece of cultural control. Egypt was not only hiding a failure, it was hiding a moment when a foreign narrative overshadowed its own. A moment when the king of a mighty empire was humbled by forces outside his control. Admitting such a moment would elevate the stories of others above the stories of Egypt, something the royal establishment would never tolerate. So Egypt didn't just hide a name. It hid a moment in history that threatened the very concept of Pharaoh, a moment that challenged their religion, their politics, their pride, and their legacy. A moment so dangerous that even mentioning it could destabilize the throne. This is why the hunt for Firon's identity becomes so difficult. We aren't just chasing a missing king. We're uncovering a story that an entire empire worked for centuries to bury beneath sand, stone, and silence. When historians try to identify the pharaoh connected to Moses, most eyes turn to the famous names Ramesses II, Merneptah, Seti I, but as researchers dig deeper, something unexpected emerges, something far more troubling than any established theory. Among the grand monuments, the towering statues, and the well-preserved tombs of Egypt's most powerful rulers, there is a shadow, a missing ruler, a silent king. A gap in the historical record so deliberate that it raises a disturbing possibility. The real Firon might not be a known pharaoh at all, but one whose name was intentionally removed from the pages of history. This idea, known as the lost pharaoh theory, has captivated archaeologists for years, because it suggests that the man who challenged Moses is missing not by coincidence, but by design. To understand this theory, we have to examine how Egyptian history was recorded. Royal lists carved into temple walls were meant to establish legitimacy, to show an unbroken line of divine kingship from one ruler to the next. These lists weren't neutral documents, they were political tools. If a king was viewed as dangerous, illegitimate, or cursed, later pharaohs simply removed him. Not scratched out lightly, but erased with purpose. Entire reigns could be wiped clean as if the king had never existed. And once a king was erased, every scribe, priest, and official was expected to follow the new version of history. The past was rewritten, and the truth became whatever the throne wanted it to be. That is where the mystery begins. In the very period scholars associate with Moses, the historical record is suspiciously inconsistent. The royal lists jump abruptly from one king to another. Archaeologists studying the 19th dynasty found traces of a pharaoh whose name was once carved into stone but later chiseled away. His monuments were damaged, his cartouches shattered, his statues toppled. No inscriptions praise him. No records celebrate his victories. It is as if his reign was associated with something Egypt wanted to forget. Even his mummy is missing, which is one of the rarest situations in Egyptian royal history. When a king's body disappears, it usually means his tomb was destroyed or hidden, not by grave robbers, but by the state itself. And this is where the lost pharaoh theory gains momentum. Unlike Ramesses II and Merneptah, who left behind an overwhelming amount of evidence, the erased king left only fragments, stone chips here, half inscriptions there, a few damaged artifacts buried in the Valley of the Kings. These fragments show that he existed, but they reveal almost nothing about who he was. This selective silence is exactly what we would expect if the pharaoh suffered a humiliation so severe that his successors felt compelled to bury every trace of him. Some researchers argue that this lost king may have been a short-reigning ruler wedged between two powerful pharaohs, someone whose time on the throne was cut abruptly due to a crisis. A king who likely ascended in turbulence and fell in catastrophe. Someone whose downfall would have threatened the divine image of kingship so deeply that Egypt had no option but to erase him. It is possible that this was the man who confronted Moses, the king whose world collapsed in a way no scribe could rewrite into a victory. There are also theories suggesting that multiple kings were merged into one memory, that the Pharaoh of Moses wasn't erased entirely, but split across different rulers depending on which events later storytellers emphasized. A military pharaoh here, an arrogant ruler there, a drowned king in another account. Over centuries, these pieces could have fused into the figure now known as Pharaoh, but the lost pharaoh. Theory argues the opposite, that there was one specific man, and Egypt hid him so effectively that even his name has vanished. The strongest support for this theory comes from something Egyptologists refer to quietly: the missing cartouche. In one temple, a king's name was hammered away with such force that the stone cracked. But enough faint outlines remain to show that a king once stood between two known rulers. A king whose name the Egyptians tried desperately to destroy. The question becomes why. What made this pharaoh so dangerous that Egypt chose to erase an entire chapter of its history rather than let his memory survive? As we dive deeper into the mystery of King Firon, one of the most fascinating aspects is the collision between the ancient evidence left behind by the Egyptians and the revelations modern science has brought to light. On one hand, we have hieroglyphics, temple inscriptions, and royal annals, painstakingly carved into stone and preserved over millennia. These documents were meant to immortalize pharaohs, to showcase their victories, their divine status, and their unshakable authority. Every battle won, every monument erected, every political move was recorded with precision, almost as if the king's life itself depended on being remembered. Yet, when historians search these texts for clues about the pharaoh who opposed Moses, they find conspicuous gaps, contradictions, and silence so profound it almost feels deliberate. This is where the intrigue begins. Ancient records seem to tell one story, while the evidence or lack of it tells another. Hieroglyphics are notoriously selective. The Egyptians were masters of shaping history to fit their worldview, and scribes were skilled propagandists. Pharaohs were presented as flawless, omnipotent gods on earth. Any military defeat, disaster, or personal failure was either omitted entirely or rewritten to reflect triumph. If we are looking for the Pharaoh of Moses in these texts, we quickly realize that the story we know from religious or historical narratives simply cannot be found in the Egyptian record. Entire campaigns, major crises, and even devastating plagues are absent, as if they never occurred. This absence is itself a clue. It suggests that the pharaoh involved faced events too catastrophic for Egypt to acknowledge publicly, events that undermined the very foundation of their kingly ideology. Modern science, however, gives us tools that the ancients did not possess, allowing researchers to peer beneath the layers of propaganda and deliberate omission. Advances in archaeology, forensic examination, radiocarbon dating, and DNA analysis have made it possible to study mummified remains, reconstruct timelines, and cross-reference historical events in unprecedented ways. When scientists examined the mummies of prominent 19th dynasty pharaohs, including Ramesses II and Merneptah, they discovered anomalies that conflict with traditional narratives. For instance, the physical condition of the mummies, the age at death, and evidence of trauma or disease sometimes fail to match the stories attributed to them in religious texts or later historical accounts. These discrepancies suggest that the Pharaoh of Moses may not have been one of the well-known rulers, but someone whose reign ended abruptly and whose remains were lost, hidden, or destroyed to erase evidence. Archaeologists also discovered fragments of inscriptions, broken statues, and damaged cartouches that point to a king intentionally erased from public memory. In one case, hieroglyphs bearing a royal name were chiseled away so thoroughly that only faint outlines remained. Yet modern imaging technology allowed researchers to detect the traces and reconstruct part of the lost inscription. This combination of ancient craftsmanship and modern scientific ingenuity has revealed patterns of erasure that are impossible to ignore. It demonstrates that Egypt's historical record, while detailed, is not infallible. It is curated, edited, and at times manipulated to protect the image of pharaohs, even at the cost of historical truth. Even more revealing is the study of timelines through dendrochronology and carbon dating. By analyzing the age of wood from temple beams, the construction phases of monuments, and the layers of sediment in burial sites, scientists have identified gaps and inconsistencies that ancient records never explain. Some rulers appear to vanish from chronological sequences entirely, as if their reigns were deliberately skipped over in official lists. These anomalies correspond to periods of political upheaval or events that may have threatened the stability of the kingdom, offering a possible link to the mysterious pharaoh of the Exodus story. Modern science has made it clear that what the Egyptians chose not to record is sometimes as significant as what they did, and in the case of King Firon, the silence is deafening. The clash between ancient evidence and modern science reveals a critical truth: history is not a fixed narrative. The Egyptians wrote what suited their ideology and convenience, while science provides a lens to uncover what was suppressed, destroyed, or forgotten. By comparing hieroglyphic accounts with forensic studies, archaeological excavations, and material analysis, researchers are beginning to reconstruct a version of events that challenges centuries of conventional understanding. The Pharaoh of Moses emerges not from the grandiose statues and temples, but from the spaces between records, the erased names and the silent tombs, inviting us to reconsider what really happened in one of history's most enduring mysteries. One of the most compelling pieces of the puzzle in the search for King Firon lies in the mummified remains of Egypt's rulers, a subject that has sparked controversy, debate, and countless theories over the past century. The discovery and analysis of royal mummies have always fascinated archaeologists and historians, offering a tangible link to the past, a direct connection to the pharaohs who once ruled one of the most powerful civilizations on Earth. Yet when it comes to the Pharaoh of Moses, the mummies that have been studied seem to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. Every piece of evidence, every scientific study, appears to contradict traditional narratives, leaving more questions than answers and raising the possibility that the true Pharaoh was deliberately hidden even from the tombs of the dead. Take, for example, the mummies of Ramesses II, the pharaoh often suggested as the most likely candidate for the Exodus story. Ramesses II's body, preserved with incredible care, shows signs of age, disease, and chronic health problems consistent with a long life. Yet if he were the Pharaoh of Moses, we would expect a ruler who suffered a sudden, catastrophic loss, potentially dying prematurely as a result of military defeat, plague, or trauma. But Ramesses II died in old age, surrounded by the trappings of power and monuments celebrating his victories. Modern forensic studies have failed to find evidence linking him to any calamity on the scale described in the Exodus narrative. While some scholars continue to argue that the story was exaggerated over time, the physical evidence of the mummy seems to contradict the idea that he was the Pharaoh who faced Moses. Then there is Merneptah, Ramesses II's son and successor. His reign shows signs of instability, including military campaigns and periods of unrest, but the mummy itself tells a different story. Merneptah lived to an advanced age, and examinations reveal no signs of a sudden, traumatic death that would match the narratives of a pharaoh's ultimate defeat. Once again, the evidence appears inconsistent with the traditional assumptions about Pharaoh, suggesting either that we have misidentified him or that the pharaoh who faced Moses was someone else, entirely someone whose body has been lost or destroyed. What makes these discoveries even more controversial is the emergence of anomalies in tombs and burial sites that don't match the official historical record. Across the Valley of the Kings, archaeologists have uncovered fragments of royal coffins, partially erased inscriptions, and mummified remains that defy easy categorization. Some tombs were looted, others intentionally destroyed, and some show signs that the pharaohs buried within were victims of political or religious erasure. These anomalies hint at a deliberate attempt to remove certain rulers from history, including possibly the pharaoh associated with Moses. The act of erasing a king from the historical record, both in life and death, was a powerful tool in the hands of Egyptian authorities, effectively allowing them to control memory, perception, and legitimacy. The more forensic scientists examine the mummies, the more they uncover contradictions. Chemical analysis of embalming materials, the study of physical trauma, and even DNA testing reveal inconsistencies between royal lineage, health, and age at death that the hieroglyphs never explain. Some mummies that should have been preserved for eternity show signs of tampering or incomplete mummification, suggesting that their deaths may have been politically inconvenient or deliberately obscured. In other words, the pharaohs who are supposed to fit the story of Moses simply do not align with the evidence left behind in their preserved bodies. This gap between historical narrative and physical reality drives the central tension of the Pharaoh mystery. While ancient records present powerful, godlike kings ruling an unbroken empire, the mummies and tomb fragments suggest hidden truths, erased lineages, and stories that Egypt preferred not to tell. The pharaoh who confronted Moses, if he existed, may be among those whose body was lost, destroyed, or hidden away a ruler whose fate was deemed too dangerous to record for future generations. Each controversial discovery, from intact mummies to broken sarcophagi, becomes a piece of a puzzle that does not quite fit, reinforcing the idea that Egypt worked tirelessly to conceal not only the king as story, but his very existence. Modern science continues to push the boundaries of what we know about these mummies, using techniques that the Egyptians could never have imagined. CT scans, isotopic analysis, and advanced imaging reveal hidden details beneath wrappings, inside coffins, and even in remnants of destroyed monuments. With every new study, the evidence grows more complex, and the mystery deepens. Historians, archaeologists, and scientists are increasingly convinced that the pharaoh we are searching for is not one of the well-documented rulers, but a lost, erased king, whose tomb may have been deliberately hidden, whose body may have been destroyed or misplaced, and whose story Egypt spent centuries trying to bury alongside him. Would you like me to expand Keynote 6 next in the same style? After exploring the tangled web of evidence from hieroglyphics and royal annals to mummies, tomb fragments, and modern forensic studies, we are left with a startling realization. The mystery of King Firon is not simply about identifying a name in the history books. It is about understanding why a civilization as meticulous, proud, and powerful as ancient Egypt would go to extraordinary lengths to erase a ruler from memory. All the clues we have gathered point to a single, unavoidable truth. Firon was deliberately removed from the story of Egypt, and his erasure speaks volumes about what he represented. When we examine the surviving evidence, patterns begin to emerge. Certain rulers from the 19th dynasty left behind abundant records, monuments, and mummified remains. Yet the events described in the stories surrounding Pharaoh simply do not align with their physical and historical footprints. Ramesses II, for instance, is a giant of history, yet his longevity and the state of his preserved body contradict the narrative of a sudden, catastrophic downfall. Meneptah, his son, shows signs of military and political challenges, but again, the evidence does not match the extreme calamities associated with the pharaoh who confronted Moses. Across the historical record, we encounter gaps, contradictions, and erasures that cannot be ignored, suggesting the possibility of a ruler whose reign was deliberately obscured. The deliberate destruction of names, cartouches, and monuments provides one of the strongest pieces of evidence for this theory. In the Valley of the Kings and beyond, archaeologists have discovered faint traces of royal names that were carefully chiseled away, statues smashed, and inscriptions defaced. In ancient Egypt, erasing a name was not a casual act. It was a calculated method to remove a person from both history and memory. This was the ultimate punishment, an act that extended beyond death, threatening the king's legacy and the spiritual continuity of his soul. The fact that this type of erasure appears in multiple sites associated with the timeline of the Exodus suggests that the pharaoh connected to Moses may have been a target of this extreme form of historical and spiritual censorship. Modern science adds another layer of insight, reinforcing the conclusions that emerge from the archaeological record. Forensic examinations of mummies, carbon dating of remains and artifacts, and chemical analyses of embalming techniques reveal anomalies that align with the theory of a deliberately erased ruler. Some mummies show evidence of tampering or incomplete preservation, others are missing entirely, leaving gaps in the royal lineage that cannot be explained by natural causes or ordinary tomb robbing. These scientific observations, when paired with the inconsistencies in the written records, strongly indicate that the Pharaoh of Moses was someone whose existence Egypt had a vested interest in hiding. There is also the broader cultural and political context to consider. Ancient Egypt was a society where kingship was inseparable from divinity. To acknowledge that a pharaoh was defeated, humiliated, or powerless would have undermined not just one ruler, but the authority of every king who came after. Erasing a pharaoh was a method of protecting the concept of divine kingship, preserving the illusion of an unbroken chain of godlike rulers. The story of Firon, therefore, becomes not merely a historical mystery, but a window into how power, religion, and memory intersected in one of the world's most remarkable civilizations. When we piece together the archaeological evidence, modern scientific data, and historical analysis, a coherent, if unsettling, picture begins to form. The Pharaoh of Moses was likely a ruler who faced extraordinary challenges, whose reign ended in crisis or humiliation, and whose story Egypt considered too dangerous to record. His name was erased, his monuments damaged or hidden, and his legacy deliberately obscured. The events that defined his rule, whether military defeat, societal upheaval, or confrontation with forces beyond his control, were so damaging that Egypt's scribes, priests, and successors went to extraordinary lengths to remove every trace. Ultimately, the mystery of King Firon teaches us something profound about history itself. The past is not always what it seems. The chronicles of civilizations are shaped by power, politics, and ideology, and the absence of evidence can be as telling as its presence. The Pharaoh, whose story was erased, reminds us that even the most dominant empires have vulnerabilities, moments of fear, and decisions that shape how history will be remembered. In the case of Firon, that erasure has endured for 3,000 years, leaving behind a puzzle that challenges historians, archaeologists, and scientists to reconstruct a truth deliberately hidden from memory. If you want, I can now take all 6 expanded keynotes and craft the full continuous video script with intro, hook, and seamless transitions ready for a 20 to 25-minute documentary-style video. This would turn all the keynotes into a polished, engaging narrative. Do you want me to do that? After traveling through the labyrinth of ancient texts, erased monuments, shattered cartouches, and controversial mummy discoveries, one truth becomes undeniable. King Firon is a figure shrouded in deliberate mystery, a ruler whose existence Egypt worked tirelessly to erase. The evidence suggests he was a pharaoh who faced unprecedented challenges, a national crisis so profound that acknowledging it would have undermined the divine authority of the kings who came after him. Hieroglyphics remain silent, royal lists skip names. Tombs hide fragments of his story, and mummies fail to match the traditional candidates. Every gap, every erasure, every anomaly points to the same conclusion: Firon was deliberately removed from history, not forgotten by accident, and the story he represents was deemed too dangerous for posterity. This mystery forces us to confront a larger lesson about history itself, that it is rarely a straightforward record of facts. It is shaped by power, ideology, and the selective memory of those who control the narrative. The Pharaoh who confronted Moses may have been defeated, humiliated, or erased, but his impact has endured in ways the Egyptians could not control. His story survived in the silence, in the gaps of records, in the questions that continue to challenge historians, archaeologists, and scientists even today. Uncovering King Firon reminds us that history is not only what is written, but also what is hidden. It is the search for truth in the spaces between monuments, in the shadows of temples, and in the traces left behind by civilizations that sought to control memory itself. And even after 3,000 years, the mystery of Firon endures, inviting us to keep questioning, to keep searching, and to keep uncovering the hidden stories of the past.